I have said that the Gospels appear to be heavily fictionalized or to be myth and legend and so on. It's difficult to find a historical core. It's, I think you could even call this New Testament minimalism. But in reaction to this, already in the 60s, there were a couple of brilliant Scandinavian scholars, Gerhardsen and Riesenfeld, who did a couple of books about the oral tradition that wound up written in the Gospels. Now, they agreed with Bultmann and Debelius and other great form critics, as they were called, that yes, much or most of the Gospel material had been passed down by word of mouth, but don't think of it like a game of telephone where people try to keep straight what they've heard, but within minutes they start distorting it unwittingly. They just can't remember it. Now, you will usually have apologists whenever anyone brings up the analogy with a telephone game, saying with a kind of a huff and a harumph that, well, that's just a party game. Surely you realize the disciples, the early Christians, would have been much more serious-minded and certainly taken the trouble to keep things accurate. Well, look, take a look at the game again. Telephone doesn't work unless people are trying their darndest to keep it straight. And they can't do it. They're not trying to distort it. That wouldn't even be funny. I mean, then you're talking about Mad Libs or something, right? The telephone game is a test of memory and oral transmission, and it's, as such, it's relevant data. Well, okay, Gerhardsen and Riesenfeld said, maybe it wasn't like that. There's another model of oral transmission, and that is that of the Jewish scribes and rabbis. They passed on their teaching from one scribe to a disciple who, he became an important scribe and a wise man and would pass on his wisdom, usually distilled in a few memorable sayings, to a disciple. And these guys must have done a pretty good job of this, because we have loads of these sayings attributed to different famous scribes in the Talmud. Well, and they love to quote a particular saying where the great Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, from late in the first century CE, congratulated a disciple of his for being a plastered cistern that loseth not a drop. Of course, by plastered, he didn't mean drunk, right? He meant a sealed, hermetically sealed container. If you pour stuff into it or out of it, it's going to be safe. It's not going to leak. In the same way, this guy can be relied upon. He will remember what I told him and pass it along. Well, on the one hand, you do have to wonder why, if people commonly pass down sayings accurately, why this guy was due to be singled out as if it were unusual. But let's leave that aside for the moment. The suggestion of Riesenfeld and Gerhardsen was, I bet this happened with the disciples of Jesus. Jesus must have given his teaching and sort of drilled his disciples. Now, you got that straight? I said, blessed are the peacemakers, not blessed are the cheesemakers, Andrew. You got that straight? And so on, right? And so that once the disciples began to pass on the teaching of Jesus, they had it memorized and passed it on accurately. And a lot of people have always referred to this and, you see, these guys refuted this notion that it was all one telephone game and that there was no way to know what Jesus really said and what he didn't and on all that. But not so fast. Right? You see what's going on here? What Riesenfeld and Gerhardsen and their many fans did was, and I preface this by saying these guys were great scholars, and indeed they were very, very learned. That makes you a scholar, but not everything a good scholar says is good, right? So you see what they're saying here is, I have come up with a way to imagine an accurate transmission of the sayings of Jesus so that what we have in the Gospels can be relied upon. Well, okay, maybe it could have happened that way, but does that make it probable that it did? Have you shown that the Bultmann critical idea is false, that it couldn't have been freewheeling tradition getting embellished and distorted and added to, like the way Martin Luther complained about Catholic Church tradition? He says, well, if we were a few hundred years ago, maybe it would be helpful, but too much water's gone under the bridge now. I mean, have we refuted that view by showing that, well, it could have happened a different way? I don't think so, right? This is common to the mindset of conservative apologists. If we can come up with a framework whereby it might all come out that Jesus really said this, Jesus really did that, the epistles were actually written by Paul, as long as it's theoretically feasible, well, then that's the way we're going to go, and we're going to say that's it. That's the historical view. Wait a second. The fact that it might have happened that way is no evidence that it did. You got to test out that hypothesis. But so far, that's all it is, and I don't think it works very well. But and there are other examples of this where apologists like F.F. Bruce and Josh McDowell, and though there's a vast gap between them, Bruce was a true scholar. McDowell was not, but they both use this argument. Many do, that the disciples of Jesus, after he was gone from the scene, would have been very zealous to safeguard the growth of tradition among popular Christians. They'd say, hey, wait just a second, not so fast. Jesus never said that. I was there, I heard it. Is it really likely these guys would have fanned out over Palestine, spying on people and censoring them? It just seems ridiculous. I mean, it's conceivable that it happened. But these guys think if they've shown that, they've shown that it did happen. No. The whole apologetics enterprise is based on if you can't prove your view absolutely and can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm wrong, well, I'm perfectly entitled to just continue believing that mine is the right one. Well, you can believe anything you want to. But the historian, as F.C. Bauer said long ago, admits anything's possible. He wants to know what's probable. And that is the last thing that apologists do. If it fits with their dogma, with their belief, okay, then that's the way it must have happened. You're just arguing in a circle.